Hello, land survey enthusiasts. Welcome to another episode of AmeriPod Let's Dig. Today, we delve into the intricate world of real estate transactions and the professionals who make them happen. We have the privilege of sitting down with a seasoned expert in the field today, an individual whose role is pivotal and yet remains somewhat mysterious to many of us, the escrow officer. Join us as we unravel the complexities of the escrow, gain insights into the critical role they play in safeguarding real estate transactions, and explore the ever-evolving landscape of real estate through the eyes of our esteemed guests. Without further ado, let's dive into enlightening conversations with Miss Brandy Dorn. Thank you so much for agreeing to do this. I'm so excited to do this podcast beyond belief. So,
only for you. I know, right? From the escrow officer's position, we don't like the limelight. So, but only for you. So, my marketing person said, "You're going to do this," and I said,
well, can you start by explaining what an escrow officer does in real estate industries and what are the primary functions and responsibilities of your role?
So for us, escrow officer, we're basically set and designed to produce title. And produce title means to ensure a buyer, the end buyer, by virtue of saying, hey, the chains of title are clean. Mm-hmm. The items that are on title, meaning loans are taken care of. Mm-hmm. So therefore, that is our production, is the title itself. As far as our role, good Lord.
Is our role supposed to be?
Yes, we have to question. The role is supposed to be basically as a third party. We're set up to not say, hey, we technically are working for the listing agent or the buyer's agent or buyer or seller. But we're there to basically negotiate and say, hey, we're here to read a contract, say what we think it says, work up the figures on it, produce the title, ensure that everything is done accurately, and then sit down and close and convey title. That's the simple format.
So how did you get into this industry?
I don't know how anybody gets into this industry, to be honest. All of us come from crazy. My background was industrial technology and architecture. That's what I came from. I worked at the World Trade Center in Dallas in the early 90s. I took a trip to Colorado and backpacked and decided I was moving to Colorado. And worked for a very short time in the mortgage industry and knew that wasn't for me. Mm-hmm. And Land Title found me at a mortgage company and said, you should be a closer. I moved into that in 96 and I've been into it ever since.
Oh my God.
I found my So, that is, I don't listen. All my friends that are entitled to, they all have the same kind of crazy story. You technically find your way into title. Somebody picks you up along the way, or you just find yourself here. And if it fits.
Many people, including myself, really, before I had the experience in buying my first home, I had no idea what you guys do. And many public, I don't think, realize that how important your role is.
Sure.
So who regulates title company?
The the Texas Insurance Commission regulates it. And then the examiners or underwriters basically take those statutes, put them into a format and say, hey, as the closers, you must abide by this. So, which is the production of our title commitment.
How do you obtain and maintain your license?
So technically, it's kind of two interesting portions. To maintain our license, we have to do so many hours of classes a year. So that's the easy portion. And most of it's been done by Zoom. So that's the easy version. Does that really train or teach us anything?
Yeah.
You have to be in the field to learn, and you have to be willing to absorb, and you have to have that natural understanding. Mm-hmm. So for me, it was instantaneous. And I went into the title world. I started as a receptionist, and I lasted my 3 months as a receptionist. My manager in Colorado picked me up and put me as a closer within 3 months of being a receptionist. And just from there, it just blew. So, you just have to have that internal intuition about what title is and understand the progression of title.
When you were in Colorado, were the rules different?
For sure.
For sure.
It's funny because the only thing you got to remember, I was in Colorado in the 90s. So it's been 25 years since I've been there. So The only thing I truly remember about Colorado versus Texas was getting here and realizing that buyers and sellers don't close together. And I remember the running joke was, and I said, well, why is that? We used to set me, everything was table funding in Colorado. We set buyers and sellers at a table with agents at the end. We closed the transaction. We funded in front of all the parties and handed checks out.
Oh, wow.
Handed keys across the table and let them walk out the door. I remember working the first year in 99 here. And I said, well, what is the deal? Why does Texas not allow buyers and sellers at the closing table together? And they jokingly said, because Texas people carry guns. And I thought, oh, dear Lord. But, I mean, that is what I meant. But Colorado was very different. I mean, I'm going to say Texas is definitely harder. What a closer does is so much more than what a closer did in Colorado. We sat down and closed transactions in Colorado. We brought in contracts, closed transactions, worked up transactions. But we didn't actually go through and itemize and take care of all the Schedule C items. Examiners did all of that. Examiners ordered payoffs. Examiners did all that stuff. Here, when I got here, I thought, how in the world do you have enough time in the day to do what we do? And you learn.
Oh, wow. Interesting.
Yeah, definitely different.
Wow. So how do they ensure compliance with regulations governing escrow transactions? And who regulates your work?
When you say regulating our work, so TDI sets the standards.
Okay.
The underwriters actually put the standards into action by putting the items in our title commitments and telling us what our requirements are. Ultimately, it's up to your closer and your closer team to make sure those items take place before insuring a policy. So if you ask the question, does it matter who your closer is and who your closing team is?
Absolutely.
100%.
100%.
Yeah.
And what are the some of the key regulations that you must adhere in your day-to-day operations?
In reference to the title commitment itself, is our regulations say that item Schedule C has to be clear before we can insure. And making sure all those items are clear before I insure it. There's a whole bunch of additional regulations that have taken place in the last couple of years, like the geographical targeting, the FinCEN, and all of that to regulate, to make sure that funds are not being, basically transferred through title, in virtue of fraud. Meaning not having a buyer come in and utilize those funds to actually transport money from out of the country into our country. So FinCEN, the geographical targeting and all of that have come into play as well. And it is ultimately the closer's responsibility to go through and make sure that they're not part of that.
You mentioned about the title policy, because that's what you guys are issuing at the end of the day. What is title policy? What is title commitment?
The title commitment is our promise to insure a policy based on what those regulations are on the title commitment. The policy is us at the end saying we're ensuring the buyer that they have basically the chain of title. They have a clear chain of title into ownership. That's number one. Number two is that all the prior liens on the property, anything that encumbered the property, have also been cleared. And then make sure that we have a valid legal description. To ensure for you.
Yeah.
Super important. So, and for that, making sure that you've got a good set of eyes for my team is making sure I've got a good set of eyes looking at all of that information, including that legal description, to make sure that it's a valid, insurable legal description to convey over the next property.
What have you experienced in the past with the legal description gone wrong?
There's so many things in virtue that legal descriptions going wrong. It could be a typo. Situation where just an examiner, they're all human. They could type, lot 62 instead of lot 61. So if your closing team is not reviewing that legal description against the CAD records, against the contract, against everything, they're continuing the problem. They're conveying a property that's not our property. So of course, that's the easy format. The not so easy format is especially when it's in a name, like in a big family that's conveyed property over time without entitled insurability. And when you do that over time and the grandfather or father has passed away and left that property to kids and they've conveyed out that property, the 30 feet of the northwest corner, blah, blah, blah. And they've done that. And then all of a sudden, one of those kids turns around and wants to sell that piece of property out to the public, to an actual resale. Those are my nightmares. Those are always my nightmares.
Yeah.
Because we don't have valid legal descriptions on any of those properties. Yeah. And obviously that's where you come in.
Could you walk me through the process of opening and managing an escrow file? Sure. In a real estate transaction. So what are the crucial steps involved and how do you navigate potential challenges?
The steps that are involved, of course, is the contract comes in the office. So we've got a valid contract that we've proceeded and sent out to all parties. And then we produce the kind of title commitment based on that contract, just distributing that contract or that commitment out to all parties so they can look at the Schedule A, versus how things look right now. Who's in ownership and what that legal description looks like. And then Schedule C, of course, saying, hey, this is my accomplishments. This is what I have to do in order to ensure my next buyer. That commitment goes out. For me, where it comes to navigating challenges, I guess. Our system is that once that title commitment goes out, our files go into this repetitive update system that me and the assistant set up that we send out to the agents saying, this is what title looks like. This is what I have to conclude or get through. These are my challenges. Here's what I'm going to do. And here's just what I need your help with. And those go out every 3 to 4 days, just kind of keeping that file moving. So there's no surprises on the file itself. Ultimately, we order the payoffs, we order the surveys. We've gotten into the world where we now order HOA, sometimes in home warranties. If you ask the question, are we supposed to? The title companies have become kind of a customer service industry as well.
Yes, absolutely.
Whether that's good or bad, I don't know. It takes away a little bit from what we're intended to do as far as producing title, making sure our insurability, and it takes our attention sometimes a little bit away from that. But the other flip side of that is that you're trying to create this space and this ability for the agents to go out there and basically conquer their next transaction and bring it in the door. So you're trying to take those things off of their plate as much as possible. So we have kind of gotten into that world where we are doing HOAs, surveys and so forth, ordering those for clients. So it is part of our world and we're okay with that. But it does bog down the time for sure.
Yeah, definitely. Then the solid partnership between these vendors.
Sure. It makes all the difference in the world.
Yeah, yes. How important is it to actually maintain that relationship?
It's incredible. I mean, obviously, title to survey companies incredibly important because the trust is there for us. I know anything I put into the system as far as a survey, you're going to call me if there's any issues and you're going to lay it out there. And I feel like the product that you provide me is, is a solid product that I don't have to worry about. Of course, with all my agents that I've worked with for 15, 20 years, I could tell you 100% those files, I know the way they work their sellers and the way they pre-work titles sometimes when it comes to estates and stuff, and they're going to keep those things in line. What I can't control, and what the agent on the listing side can't control either, is what lenders are coming into the transaction. Been around long enough to say that typically I see a lot of the same lenders, especially in the San Antonio area, and I can usually tell by looking at my lenders that it's going to be a great transaction. I know and I trust them. But you don't always have control of that. The lending side of it, who the buyer brings in, that sometimes can be a little bit of a challenge just because, we're not used to that lender or maybe they're an out-of-state lender and not someone here. So they don't realize that the different things that we deal with in Texas versus, and we're a different type of state when it comes to title, lending world. And I'm sure probably you can in the survey.
I mean, you deal with various transactions from residential properties to commercial and also, then we call it farm and ranch. Sure. Which one of those transactions that you prefer?
Which one? I'm sorry, I didn't hear.
That I prefer.
Oh, I prefer. Oh. So this is what I'll say has been it's truly been my saving grace in this industry is that I never parked myself in one transaction where it was just a refi closer or just a residential or commercial or development closer. I basically spread myself out when I got here.
Yeah.
When I was in Colorado, you had to be designated as a type of closer.
Really?
You were put in categories. And so when I got here, I thought, they didn't make you do that I was literally going to spread. And so that saved me when we had slowdowns. My developer was insanely busy during the slowdowns. My custom builders are incredibly busy right now when residential kind of slows down. The emotional aspect of things residentially are a lot higher than the emotional aspect.
That's what I wanted to priorities. Why do you think that is? Is it because there's a personal connections from the property with the seller?
Your buyers and sellers are individuals. Yeah. Commercially, your buyers and sellers are entities usually, typically, and everything's being handled technically by an attorney that's basically ciphering out, looking at our work too. So honestly, if you ask the question of which one's easier, commercial is easier than residential.
So if commercial is easier, why would the commercial transaction actually take longer to close?
It's not, when you say that, it doesn't necessarily take longer. The title production is going to take longer.
Oh, why is that?
Because of the type of legal description on that property.
I
see. The legal description and looking, and plus the Schedule B items are certainly more at play. Versus residentially, we don't look at Schedule B. Schedule B to us is just letting you know these restrictions, these exceptions are there, and they stay there, and they're going to be conveyed or they're going to be noted on your policy as exceptions. Other than that, it's usually just the restrictions, these with the setbacks, and then I turn around and I look at a survey, and I'm like, well, we're going to have to put an exception on the Schedule B because the house, the setback line's running directly to the center of the house, so it's an issue. It's a little issue.
Well, you have been in the title industry for a long time, and I know you probably have so many stories of it. But what measures do you take to safeguard funds and sensitive documents during the escrow process?
Sure.
How do you ensure security and prevent fraud or mishandling of funds?
We've seen a lot, for sure.
Especially these days with vacant lots transactions.
Oh, absolutely. So the first is, of course, the wiring situation when it comes to wiring in earnest money or wiring in funds up for the bottom line too. Everything when it comes to wires are done either in person or over the phone. When we email out wiring instructions, we block out account numbers, so it forces the client to actually call in and go over it verbally with you. In regards to the lot transactions that have taken place, and you've seen a lot, and I had and it's an AI story. I had an AI buyer and seller. Both of them were not real entities or real people. And it was a lot transaction, and the way they did, no, actually it wasn't a lot transaction. It was a cash transaction, and it was a large cash transaction. The money that was brought in via check from out of the country because the buyer was out of the country traveling. The money got deposited, reached out, we emailed all parties to let them know we received, earnest money and so forth, along with our set closing. And the buyer turned around when that deposit happened, turned around and terminated the contract and wanted those funds released immediately. And when that happened, there was a lot that goes in between. There was conversations going back and forth that I sent to our IT and said, this is strange. It's the rhythmatic of the way they were speaking to each other. Mm-hmm. And every time I called, I got a voicemail and nobody would take my phone call. And then they wanted the obviously the lease, and it had, it would take almost 6 weeks to clear the bank. This was an out-of-country transaction. So we found out both. We had IT, who's actually here today working. We had them run the email locations to find out that they were not just fraud, but they were basically computer generated.
Oh my goodness me.
But it goes on. The stories when it comes to that, it all comes down to, in our world, it comes down to the individuals and the people that are watching the emails, talking to their clients, and making sure you can have the secured systems as we all have them. But talked to a banking company that told me they are 100 steps ahead of you. No matter what you do in security, there are people that walk in the door to work from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. And that's what they're doing. They're doing phishing emails. You're never going to catch up with them. Mm-hmm. Have your IT and all that in place. But your people have to be well educated down to your agents as well. But that we don't take wires. We don't change wiring instructions via email. We do wire instructions at the closing table in person. Mm-hmm. It's just a ton of, just repetitive, having this conversation, the old-fashioned way of dealing with business.
Oh, my.
To make sure it takes time. It's taken a lot of time out of the closing world. I'm sure it takes time out of y'all.
Yeah, too. Yeah.
But it takes a tremendous amount of time, but it's what we're doing.
Wow. How do you stay updated with the industry trends and changes in regulations? Especially, there's so many new title companies that come Sure. And they just come and go.
Yeah. Come and go.
So how do you act? What do you think the most essential skill?
It's maybe driven from our company too, because we're a very customer service driven company, versus all the bells and whistles and, being able to provide a tremendous amount of gadgets. We are not like that. We've built our company on relationships and having those relationships over long terms and giving them that customer service and the product that we were designed to give them. So that's what we base our business on. We try to stay away from all because you can't compete in the world. All the new title companies will pop up and they'll compete in that world a little bit. Yet when their customer service fails, their title fails, then those companies will ultimately disappear.
What are some common misconceptions about the role of an escrow officer, and how would you clarify or debunk them? Because to me, you guys always look glamorous. And you cannot be that busy if you have, a good hair day all the time. And, I always think like, oh my gosh, they have nice offices. They always look great. You can't be that busy. That's basically,
I thought a good escrow officer doesn't sleep because I mean, there's a group of us that, we've been in business for so long that we're at different title offices and we touch base with each other at the end of the month. Are you doing okay? Did you sleep last night? The misconception, there's so many misconceptions. I feel like I'm on the phone all the time and saying, and your title, when they call and ask, had someone call this morning that wanted me to put in writing for the taxable year for 2024, what the new buyer's taxes would be with his exemptions, his homestead exemptions, removing his 65 exemptions and so forth. And I said, but the taxing authority doesn't even know what the tax rate is for 2024, nor the values. And she said, but your title. And I am titled. It's the funny thing that we're kind of everything in between. So everything that lending can't do or agents can't do, they just assume falls in the title world.
You basically have to know every single answers of any questions that they may have.
Yeah.
You're like a fountain of knowledge. That's how.
Or at least, be able to say, obviously, that doesn't fall within my role. I would assume it would be this because I know what the tax rates and guidelines are for 2023, but we don't know. You're basically barking at the wrong tree. Yeah.
So in your experience, what are some of the most challenging aspects of being an escrow officer?
Every day is a challenge. And that's probably why we're in it still. Some people like that kind of craziness, and I guess we're one of those people. But obviously managing personalities, dealing with agents or buyers and sellers when they get, emotionally and highly impacted because of, you don't know who's coming at them. Mm-hmm. But everything comes at titles. We're the end result. Even though we're all the way through the process, people see us as the end result. We're the ones at the very end producing the numbers and getting into the closing table. So a lot of times all those emotions fall on us. So probably managing those emotions, keeping those people calm during the process.
So how do you overcome those challenges and keep yourself professional at all times?
That's probably the difference between like us and marketing. Look at marketing and they're kind of these extroverts. We're almost like introverts that, we absorb a lot. And we do have to stay, with some compassion, of course, understanding their roles from selling and purchasing. You have to have compassion to what they're doing. But you also have to end up being that person that's just kind of the calming aspect of the event, the closing itself.
So you basically the middle party for the seller, the buyer, and the real estate agents, and the surveyor, and the HOA people. And you don't order appraisal. Right? That's the lenders, right? Right.
So warranties have come into play a lot.
6. Oh, no, actually, there are 2 agents, right? Buyers and sellers. 7.
We've added that because I always tell people that you've got to realize too, we have examiners, we have attorneys, we have underwriters. That our network, with dealing with one transaction, you can get anywhere from, I say, 8 to 12 parties when you start spreading that out. So that's a lot of phone calls to be, That's why it helps tremendously. And we do this rolling update every 3 to 4 days to kind of keep people on track, to alleviate the call-ins to check on things, so the emails and the updates just help people, here we are, and this is where we're at, this is where we need help, because it helps me a tremendous amount not to be on the phone 24/7.
What's the shortest time period for you to close a property?
The shortest ever. My own in one day. In Colorado. That was just because it was my own, and then that count. That's easy. I called my head attorney and I said, "Hey," he said, "I can do it for you in 2 hours." Typically 2 to 3 days on a serious rush, meaning that title can be produced
From the time that you receive the contract?
If I receive a contract and turn it in, I have turned, you're supposed to give the incentives 3 to 5 days. I've turned in a rush and got it in 24 hours. If it's a cash transaction and it comes in and I don't have a payoff situation, I have an existing survey, then literally I'm just ordering a deed and close it usually within the next day. So we're watching it 3 days. That has to be a clean property.
So what's the longest that you've ever had?
The one I had closing this afternoon, that we put the order in, it was either end of August or beginning of September.
Last year? And it's just gonna close today.
It was one of those that had you looked at it, you would have thought it could never possibly close, or it wouldn't ever possibly close.
How important is it to maintain a good collaboration and communications between various parties?
When you've got that good relationship, like I said, with your agents, and maybe you don't have control over the lenders aspect of it, I always say, if a lender is communicating with me, even if it's not providing me good news, but is communicating with me, it makes all the difference in the world. I can then spread the knowledge out to everybody else and send updates that, say, this is what we're looking at. We are still waiting. We have these challenges, versus somebody that doesn't communicate with us. And that's our stalemate. You can't do anything. Nobody's.
How often do you have to renew your license? I mean, every year. Okay. There are very new type of companies,
jumping, yeah, everywhere.
So what advice would you offer to someone considering a career as an escrow officer?
We were new, obviously, at one point. So just make sure, if you're going into the escrow officer world, make sure that you get with a company that you can hopefully have a long relationship with. You hate seeing in the escrow world and jumping from one company, because ultimately every company basically has somewhat of the same work. We're doing the same product for sure. It's the people. So make sure that you're getting into the company that the people, are important to you. Yeah, the people.
And you like to work with.
And you respect. They have the same ethics and the same goals that you have. And I obviously found it because our office, this company, we just hit 19 years in January.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah.
Oh my gosh. I know that for cash transactions, they don't require title policy or survey because they can just close, right? If they don't want to pay that.
I'll tell you, on the title policy side, we wouldn't close them.
You wouldn't close them?
Back years ago, we used to do some of those transactions and just clearly put no policy and just do the escrow side transaction. But the unfortunacy of that is that, lawsuits take place sometimes. When a title company is involved, when title companies do, we produce policies. And if they later have a problem, they can say, well, there was a title company involved. And I can say, well, it clearly said you weren't doing title. Then why were you involved? Oh, so we backed out because the consumer wins. When they have courts, typically. So we kind of backed out of the escrow side, where it was just to do escrow only, because we are a title company and we're here to insure.
So if you're not insuring a title policy, basically you will not close.
Correct.
Wow. What advice would you give to those who consider buying a property and skipping having the title?
Sorry, let me jump ahead of you. They're so cute. It's kind of like anything else. I can't fathom purchasing a property without insurability.
Yeah.
I just can't fathom. I've had people that feel pretty secure because maybe they know who they're purchasing from. Mm-hmm. And then like just realizing, or most likely the largest purchase that you're doing. And to do something like that without insurability, to have something come up later, you have no recourse. I mean, whatsoever.
Yep.
And the biggest problems I have, I tell people this all the time, the only properties I've ever hit that are uninsurable properties usually are properties that have changed hands and didn't get insured in the back. So therefore, we either have a skip in the chain somewhere and nobody's noticed it until they come for insurability because they're going out to the, to an individual. And there's a skip and maybe that party, is unfindable or has passed away. And it becomes a situation at some point that it's uninsurable. So I wouldn't put myself in that position as a buyer on a piece of property.
And wouldn't give any advice. Otherwise, it's not worth it.
It's certainly not worth it.
Not worth it.
Even if you have to sit there and say, maybe I don't need insurance for $500,000, maybe I come in and I decide that I don't want insurance for something else. But you need to have some type of title down on your property.
I completely agree with that. Not because I work for a surveying company, but because I get to witness this. The two things that I will never skip when purchasing a property: having a title company and good title company, sure, to back you up with your transactions, and a good survey.
Sure.
Those two. I have a story that I would like to share. There was this investor purchasing vacant lots. There's about 50 lots. He purchased those lots cash. So it's 50 feet wide lot for individuals. So you could basically build a small, decent home.
Sure.
He was planning to make like a mini subdivision. Comes to when he came to develop, then he had to get loan. So to get a loan, then you need to have title company involved. So the title company issued a policy. It was a standard lot and block, lot 1 to 50 kind of thing, as an example. When we did the survey, we found out that more than 1.5 acre of the portion of the land occupied by squatters.
Nice.
Just imagine how many lots there are.
Yeah.
He knew it was fenced in, but he thought that the end of the property line ends on that fence. He did not realize that the client owned big portion of the other side of the fence. The seller did not disclose it.
Sure.
And it was a cash transaction, no title company involved, and he did not get any insurance out of that. And title company now could not be made liable because they just issued a title policy.
It's crazy.
It's crazy.
It's crazy. Yeah, you think about the world of the surveys. People don't have an idea. I mean, they see a house, they see a fence around property, and they just assume
that's the fence line is still your boundary line.
That is just, that's the old given.
Yeah.
So they assume when you produce a survey, half the time they're like, I own the 20 feet behind the fence. And I said, you do. This is what you own. That's like, but they wouldn't have a clue. I mean, they wouldn't have any idea without that survey.
What would you, looking back throughout your career, from the start to now, what would you change if you could change in the beginning?
Change as far as
the way you deal with the transactions back then and to now. There's any change between those times back in the day to now?
I mean, I feel like we've always been very customer service driven. Mm-hmm.
Just the human interaction.
Yes. I think that in our world here, we do spend a lot of time on the phone and calling, and we know our agents so well because they're the reoccurring agents. But that's about the only thing I would like to go back to a little bit, is that having that person, that in person all the time, that we felt a little closer maybe to our agents at one point. And now it's the world that we live in. Everybody has emails. You just flying. I mean, everybody has just duplicated the amount of work we all do. And so in order to keep up, you have to use the technology we were given.
I don't know whether you know when AT&T was down completely for 6 hours. We had no emails, communications.
Yeah. Well, I still don't understand why certain people got affected and why certain people.
Yeah, that's right. Just imagine today, in today's world, if technology was real setback. Oh my God.
How lost you felt for that.
Yeah.
That little bit of time, just going from home and being off of Wi-Fi to right here and not being able to communicate with somebody. It was bizarre.
Yeah.
Said the same thing as that our world. And what happened?
We revolve our world into this small thing.
It has its pros and its cons, for sure.
Yeah, for sure. Well, Miss Brandy, this has been a delight. I love this segment, and I hope everybody actually learned something new. And thank you for all you do. And the CEO title is basically one of the best title companies that I've worked with. I love every single one of them. So thank you so much for spending your time, your busy time. And that is it.
Well, thank you.
I really did ready.
Very much.